The cardboard under my back had gone soft after 3 months of sleeping on it, warmed by my own body heat and dampened now and then by leaks from the old Honda's sunroof. I pressed my hand to the cold car window, watching my breath cloud the glass in neat little circles. Outside, a lonely streetlight stretched long shadows across the empty parking lot behind what used to be a grocery store. That lot had been my home since October. My daughter, Emily, kept echoing in my head from our last call. "Just stay in your car a little longer, Mom. I'm swamped with the baby coming. You understand, right?" Oh, I understood, more than she realized. The flood had washed away everything. My little house on Willow Lane, all my photos, my mother's china, 40 years of carefully built memories. The insurance covered the walls, sure, but not the life I'd lost inside them. At 62, I had nothing left but a beat-up 12-year-old Honda Civic and the clothes I'd saved from the muddy wreckage. Emily had been kind at first. "Of course you can stay with us, Mom, just until you get back on your feet." But temporary had turned into awkward, and awkward had turned unbearable the moment her husband, Mark, started taping passive-aggressive notes to the fridge about utility bills and grocery costs. The morning I packed my few belongings back into the car, Emily barely looked up from feeding little Sophie in her high chair. "That's probably for the best," she said, wiping mashed banana from Sophie's chin. "Mark's been stressed with that big promotion at work, and you know how he gets when he's stressed." "Oh, I knew. Mark got mean. He got self-important. And he had no problem treating me like a burden in a house that was supposed to be my temporary refuge." Now, stretched out in the backseat of my car with my winter coat as a blanket, I couldn't help wondering if this was how my own mother had felt in her later years. Unseen, inconvenient, tossed aside when love became too much trouble. My phone buzzed against my chest. A text from Emily. "Hope you're doing okay. Mark got the promotion. We're house hunting now. Baby number 2 is due in spring." I stared at the screen until it went dark, then set the phone down without answering. He hoped I was doing okay. She hoped I was okay while I slept in a freezing car in December, right here in Ohio, while she planned bigger houses and a growing family. The next morning, like every other morning, I drove to the public library and parked in my usual spot near the back entrance. Rosa Kelly, the kind-hearted librarian, had stopped asking about my daily routine weeks ago. She just gave me a polite nod as I passed the circulation desk on my way to the computer stations. That's where I spent hours applying for jobs, checking assistance programs, and piecing my life back together one slow click at a time. And it was there, on a Tuesday that felt no different from any other Tuesday, that I saw the email that would change everything. "Dear Linda Carter," it began, and I had to read the sender's name twice to believe it. Anderson, Burke and Associates, Attorneys at Law. My heart pounded as I scrolled. "We represent the estate of your late aunt, Margaret Collins. We have been trying to locate you regarding a bequest in her will. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss the inheritance she has left you." I sat frozen in that hard plastic chair, rereading the message over and over. Aunt Margaret. My mother's sister. The one who'd moved to California in the 80s and slowly drifted out of family holidays and Christmas cards. I thought she'd died years ago, forgotten like so many distant relatives. But she hadn't forgotten me. The phone call to the attorney's office felt surreal. Yes, they confirmed Margaret Collins had left her entire estate to me. A house in Pasadena, California, investment accounts, life insurance. The lawyer's voice stayed flat and businesslike as he rattled off numbers that made my hands tremble. "The property is worth about $850,000, he said. "Liquid assets total another $320,000. There are some debts, but you're looking at well over $1 million, Miss Carter." When I hung up, I just sat there stunned while the library hummed on around me. Students typed papers, retirees flipped through newspapers, kids giggled in the story corner. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that the homeless woman at the corner computer had just inherited a fortune. The drive back to my parking lot felt like a dream. I kept waiting to wake up in the back seat, shivering, realizing it was just another cold, desperate fantasy. But the lawyer's business card in my pocket was real, and so was the follow-up email on my phone. I thought about calling Emily, telling her the news, watching her tone shift from polite distance to sudden enthusiasm. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the memory of Mark's notes on the fridge. Maybe it was how easily Emily had treated my homelessness as a minor inconvenience. Or maybe it was that small, hard seed of anger that had been growing in me all these months, fed by every night I spent sleeping in a car while my daughter snuggled under a warm blanket, planning nurseries and new homes. Dad, I booked a motel. A real bed for the first time in months. I paid cash for 3 nights and took the longest, hottest shower I could remember. In the mirror, I saw a stranger, thinner than I'd been in years, hollow cheeks, eyes dulled by months of disappointment. But there was something else there too. A spark I hadn't seen in a long time. A hint of the woman I used to be. That night, I sat on the motel's Wi-Fi, scrolling through Pasadena real estate listings, staring at photos of the house that was now mine. A charming craftsman bungalow with a wide porch and old orange trees in the yard. It needed work, sure, but it was beautiful. It was home. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Emily. Haven't heard from you in a few days. Everything okay? I typed and erased a dozen replies. Part of me wanted to tell her, to show her I wasn't as helpless as she thought. But a bigger part of me wanted to wait. So I finally wrote, I'm fine. Just figuring some things out. The next morning I booked my flight. The lawyer would meet me at the property, walk me through everything Margaret had left. I paid for the ticket with the money I'd been hoarding for an apartment security deposit. The money I guarded like a dragon guards gold. Packing didn't take long. Everything I owned still fit into 2 grocery bags. I thought about the woman I was 3 months ago. The woman who'd lost everything to a flood and accepted her daughter's pity because she thought she had no other choice. That woman was gone. In her place was someone tougher. Someone who'd learned love could be conditional, that family could turn temporary, and that sometimes the people who claimed to care about you most were the first to abandon you when it got hard. I left the motel key on the nightstand and stepped out into the cold December air. The Honda started right away like it knew we were finally heading somewhere better. But I didn't drive to the airport just yet. Instead, I detoured past Emily's house. A neat colonial in a nice neighborhood, Mark's truck in the driveway, kids' toys scattered across the lawn. This was the house where I'd been tolerated for 6 weeks before being gently, politely, efficiently pushed out. I sat there in my car, engine running, watching the windows. A part of me wanted to knock to tell Emily everything, to see if money might bring back the daughter who used to call every Sunday just to talk. But these past months had taught me something. Dignity once lost isn't easy to get back. And the people who hurt you most often do it with smiles, excuses, and the soft language of love. So I put the car in drive and headed for the airport. In the rearview mirror, Emily's house grew smaller. Ahead, California waited. And with it, the chance to figure out who I could become when I no longer had to beg for scraps of affection from people who saw me as nothing but a burden. The change had already begun. I could feel the difference in myself, even in the way I held my shoulders, the steadiness of my hands on the steering wheel. I wasn't the same woman who had accepted sleeping in a car just because her daughter was too busy to care. The California sun felt like forgiveness on my face as I stepped off the plane at LAX. For 3 long months, I had lived under Ohio's gray winter skies, curled up in parking lots behind abandoned strip malls. But here, even in December, the air was soft and warm, carrying the promise of a new beginning. Anderson, Burke & Associates had sent a car service to pick me up, and the driver, a weathered man named Carlos Dean, had the relaxed friendliness of someone who'd spent his whole life in Los Angeles. First time in California? He asked as we merged onto the freeway, his movements smooth and practiced. First time in 40 years, I said, watching palm trees whip by like punctuation marks against the bright blue sky. What brings you back? An inheritance. The words still felt strange, like they didn't belong to me. From an aunt I hardly knew. Carlos glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Funny how family works. The ones you expect to be there let you down, and the ones you barely think about end up saving you. I thought about Emily's cheerful text updates, full of baby clothes and mortgage plans, sent to a mother who had been sleeping in her car. Yes, I said quietly. Funny how that works. The house on Maplewood Avenue was even better than the photos. A 1920s craftsman bungalow with original hardwood floors and built-in bookcases. It sat on a corner lot shaded by huge old oak trees. The front porch wrapped around 2 sides of the house, and even though the paint was peeling and a few repairs were obvious, it had the kind of solid bones that made you feel safe. Attorney Thomas Hale was waiting for me at the front gate. Thin, serious, and dressed in an expensive suit, he looked almost startled when I stepped out of the car in my thrift store jeans and sweater. Miss Carter, he said, blinking. I was expecting, well, someone different. I glanced down at my worn clothes. Different how? Your aunt spoke about you often in her last years, he said carefully. She made it sound like you were successful, settled. I assumed. He stopped when he noticed me gripping the gate for balance, staring at the house that was suddenly mine. My aunt was remembering me from 40 years ago, I said quietly. People change. Circumstances change. Inside, the house felt alive, like someone had truly loved it. Bookshelves lined the walls, plants filled sunny corners, and every room held antiques chosen with care. The kitchen had been updated in the 90s, dated now but spotless and functional. My Aunt Margaret had left behind more than a house. She had left a life, complete and carefully tended. The neighbors have been keeping an eye on the place, Thomas said as we walked through rooms scented faintly of lavender and old books. They've been watering plants, collecting mail. Mrs. Wright next door has a key. She's been worried about what would happen to the house. In the master bedroom, photographs covered the dresser. Margaret through the years. Young, then middle-aged, then older, always smiling. In many of the pictures she wasn't alone. A tall woman with soft silver hair appeared in photos that spanned decades. Sitting together at dinner tables, laughing in gardens, traveling, always side by side. Was my aunt married? I asked. Thomas hesitated. She shared her life with someone. Yes. Her name was Elaine Porter. They were together for 37 years until Elaine passed in 2019. Your aunt never really recovered from losing her. I picked up a photo of them on the porch, both in their 70s, hands laced together. The way Margaret leaned against Elaine, the way Elaine's thumb rested protectively over Margaret's fingers. You could feel their love even in a still picture. Did Elaine have family? I asked. A son in Oregon, Thomas said. He never visited. He was angry when Elaine left everything to your aunt. Bitter about it, from what I understand. And suddenly I understood why Margaret had chosen me. Not because we were close, but because we both understood something. Family isn't always about blood. And love given freely is far rarer than love people feel entitled to. The paperwork took hours. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, insurance policies. A lifetime of careful saving and planning laid out in neat files. Margaret had been a retired teacher who invested wisely and lived simply. She'd owned the house outright for 15 years. After taxes and fees, Thomas explained, the liquid assets come to $347,000. The house is valued at about $865,000, though in this market it could sell for more. There's also a small life insurance policy. Altogether, you're inheriting just over $1.2 million. The numbers didn't feel real. They sounded like prices on things I'd never dreamed of buying. But the house felt real. The keys in my hand felt real. For the first time in months, I had a home again. After Thomas left, I wandered through the rooms alone, slower this time. In the kitchen, I found a note taped neatly to the fridge. For the neighbor who feeds the plants and brings in the mail, there's wine in the pantry and cookies in the blue tin. Help yourself. I knocked next door, and a woman in her 70s opened the door, her face lighting up when I introduced myself. You're Margaret's niece, she said warmly. Oh honey, she talked about you all the time. Laura this, Laura that. She was so proud of you. Sharon Harris invited me in for coffee, and for 3 hours she shared stories about my aunt. She worried about you, Sharon said softly. Especially this past year. She had a feeling you were struggling. She wanted to help, but she didn't want to intrude. Laura's strong, she'd say. But everyone needs help sometimes. I sat there thinking about the months I'd spent sleeping in my car, counting every dollar, losing pieces of my dignity one day at a time. Margaret had sensed my struggle from 2,000 miles away, while my own daughter, just 30 minutes from me, had treated it like an inconvenience to her comfortable life. She changed her will 6 months ago, Sharon continued. She made me promise to look out for you when you came. She said you might need extra kindness when you arrived. That evening I stood on Margaret's porch, my porch now, and called Emily for the first time since arriving. Mom. Finally, she said when she picked up. I was starting to worry. Where are you? California, I said simply. California? Doing what? Did you find a job? Something like that. I watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink I'd almost forgotten existed. I inherited a house. There was a pause. Inherited? What do you mean? My Aunt Margaret died. She left me her house. And some money. Margaret? I thought she died years ago. How much money? There was. Not I'm sorry for your loss. Not I'm so glad you have a home again. Just how much money? Enough, I said. Well, that's amazing. Mark and I were just talking about how we could help you get back on your feet. This solves everything. When are you coming home? Home. As if the car I'd been sleeping in for 3 months had been home. As if the parking lot behind a boarded-up grocery store was where I belonged. I'm not sure I am coming home, Emily. Another pause. What do you mean? Your life is here. Sophie misses you. And with the baby coming, you seemed to manage fine while I slept in my car, I said quietly. Mom, that's not fair. We let you stay for 6 weeks until Mark. Look, maybe we didn't handle everything perfectly, but we're family. This inheritance is wonderful, but you don't need to run away to California. We can help you find a nice place close to us. Close to them. Close enough to babysit when they needed me or help with projects, but not close enough to be a daily reminder of how easily they turn me away. I need time to think, I said. Think about what? Mom, you're not making sense. Come home. We'll figure it out. But as I looked out at the garden Margaret and Elaine had planted together, at this quiet neighborhood where people left notes for each other and took care of empty houses, I realized I might already be home. I'll call you in a few days, I said and hung up before Emily could answer. That night, I slept in a real bed for the first time in months. Margaret's bed in Margaret's house, surrounded by the quiet comfort of a life well lived. The sheets smelled faintly of lavender, and through the open window, I heard the soft rustling of orange trees in the backyard. But sleep didn't come easily. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages from Emily, each more insistent than the last. Mom, call me back. We need to talk about this properly. Mark thinks you're not thinking clearly. Mark always had opinions about my inheritance, my choices, my life. The same Mark who left notes about utility bills when I was homeless, who was now, according to Emily, looking at bigger houses and planning bigger families. I finally turned off my phone and lay in the quiet, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of my new neighborhood. A train whistle carried faintly through the night, and headlights sometimes swept across the walls. Tomorrow I'd start building a new life. Tomorrow I'd decide who deserved to be part of it. But tonight, for the first time in months, I was warm, safe, and sleeping in a place that was mine. I wasn't the woman who had curled up in the back of a car because her daughter was too busy to care. 3 weeks in California had changed me. My skin had lost the gray tint of Ohio winters and homeless nights, and my shoulders no longer carried the hunch of constant disappointment. Sometimes, when I caught my reflection in Margaret's antique mirrors, I saw glimpses of the woman I'd been before the flood, before Mark's notes, before I'd learned to shrink myself to fit other people's idea of convenient. Each morning, I drank coffee on the porch, watching Sharon Harris work in her garden. She'd wave, sharing cheerful updates. Maria Garcia's new baby, the Thompsons' kitchen renovation, the Thursday book club. Ordinary life, the kind I'd almost forgotten. The house was slowly becoming mine through small choices. I'd moved Margaret's mystery novels to make space for the few books I'd saved from the flood, rearranged the kitchen for my left-handed cooking, and hung my mother's quilt, the only piece of family history I had left, where sunlight caught its faded colors. My phone had been quiet for days after I stopped answering Emily's frantic messages. But that morning, as I sipped coffee and watched Sharon trim her roses, it rang. Mom, thank God, Emily said. I've been worried sick. I'm fine, Emily. Just settling in. Settling in? You can't just disappear to California. Sophie keeps asking where Grandma is. Her name brought a pang. My sweet granddaughter who loved silly games and bedtime stories. But even that love had been filtered through Emily's schedule and boundaries, careful to keep me from staying too long or expecting too much. How's Sophie? She's fine, but that's not the point. You're running away instead of facing reality. Mark and I think you should come home immediately. This California thing is just escapism. Mark and I think, as if his opinion mattered. As if the man who made me feel unwelcome in my daughter's house had any right to judge my life. What reality am I avoiding? You can't play house in some dead woman's place and pretend your real life doesn't exist. You have family here. I had no family when I was sleeping in my car. Oh, don't be so dramatic. That was temporary. We were figuring things out. For 3 months, Emily. I was homeless for 3 months while you figured things out. Well, now you're not. Problem solved. So sell the house, take the money, and come home where you belong. Where I belonged, Close enough for babysitting and holiday help, far enough not to interfere. I like it here. You don't know anyone there. I'm getting to know people. The neighbors are lovely. Neighbors aren't family, Mom. Sometimes they're better. The silence stretched until Emily spoke, voice tight. Fine. Have your little adventure, but don't expect us to keep your life on hold. Mark got the promotion, remember? We're looking at real houses, not some old lady's leftovers. Congratulations on Mark's promotion, I said, meaning it less than she thought. We're flying out next weekend, she added. I froze. What? Cheap tickets. Mark has vacation days. We'll see the house, help you get your head on straight, maybe look at the market. Help me get my head on straight. As if going from homeless to homeowner meant I was confused. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? We're family. Some of the things you've been saying worry us. Cutting contact isn't like you. She was right, it wasn't like the old me. The old me would have scrubbed the house spotless and spent money I didn't have just to make them comfortable. But that woman had slept in a car for 3 months while her daughter redecorated a nursery. When are you arriving? Saturday afternoon. We'll get a hotel nearby. Mark found a good place with his work discount. Of course, a hotel. Not because my house wasn't big enough. Margaret's guest room was lovely, but because staying here would mean admitting this was my home. I'll pick you up at the airport, I said finally. Perfect. Mom. This California thing, it's just grief. Grief makes people do strange things. After I hung up, I sat on the porch watching Sharon work. She noticed my stillness and came to the fence. Everything all right, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost. My daughter's coming to visit. Sharon brightened. How wonderful. I should be excited, but I'm not. I told her everything. Emily's assumption I needed fixing, Mark's opinions, their plans to set me straight. Sharon listened quietly. When I finished, she paused, pruning shears idle. You know, Margaret went through something similar when she first moved here. Her sister, your mother, came to visit, full of opinions. Spent 3 days trying to convince her to move back to Ohio, marry a nice man, live a normal life. Sharon snipped a rose sharply. Margaret told me she learned something important that week. What? That real love doesn't try to change you back into who you were. It celebrates who you're becoming. That afternoon, I drove to a hardware store in a nearby town where no one knew me. I bought new locks for the doors, good ones. The clerk, an elderly man named Walter Briggs, helped me choose tools and gave me careful instructions. Changing locks is empowering, he said. Makes a house truly yours. That evening, I worked slowly with Margaret's toolbox and Walter's notes, installing the new locks until the last click of the deadbolt echoed through the quiet house. The work was satisfying, demanding focus and precision, leaving no space for anxiety about the weekend. When I finished, I stood in the entryway turning my new keys, listening to the solid click of the locks. Saturday morning, I woke early and dressed with care. I chose a blue dress I'd bought the week before, the first new clothing in months. It fit well, made me look competent, like a woman who belonged in her own home. The airport was chaos, holiday travelers and delayed flights thick with stress. I found Emily and Mark at baggage claim, both looking tired and irritated. Emily hugged me briefly, then studied me with the kind of scrutiny reserved for suspicious packages. You look different, she said. I look rested, I answered. Mark gave a perfunctory hug and immediately began complaining about the flight, the airport, California traffic. I listened politely as I led them to my car. Not the old Honda, but a used Prius I'd bought the week before. Nice car, Mark said, surprised. The inheritance must have been bigger than you told Emily. Casual words, but revealing. They weren't here out of concern. They were here to evaluate what I had and how it might benefit them. Big enough, I said. On the way to their hotel, Emily kept up cheerful chatter about their house hunt, Mark's promotion, their growing family, a rehearsed reminder of everything I was missing by staying here. We found this amazing house, Emily said. 4 bedrooms, perfect for us. The only problem is the down payment. Even with Mark's raise, it's a stretch. We were thinking of asking family for help. There was. At the hotel, I helped with luggage and agreed to pick them up for dinner in 2 hours. As I drove off, I caught a glimpse of them in my rearview mirror, standing close, already discussing strategy. But I had strategies of my own now. I was no longer the desperate woman grateful for 6 weeks of grudging shelter. I had a home, choices, and the power to say no. Dinner was at Pasadena's best restaurant. Mark's suggestion, naturally. An expensive place meant to show they weren't struggling, just strategically seeking help. Emily wore her newest dress, and Mark spent 20 minutes talking about his promotion as if he were running the company. I listened politely, nodding in the right places while watching them perform their polished routine. The house we're looking at is really an investment, Mark said, cutting his steak with surgical precision. Property values have jumped 30% in 5 years. With the baby coming, we need the space, but it's also about building family wealth. It sounds wonderful, I said. Emily leaned forward, eyes bright. I wish you could see it, Mom. The kitchen's incredible with an island. The master suite has a sitting area perfect for nursing. The backyard's huge. Sophie would love it. And there's a separate space over the garage, Mark added. Perfect for extended family visits. You could stay as long as you wanted. Extended family visits, polite code for. You can help when needed but never belong. How much help are you asking for? I asked. A quick glance passed between them, one I'd have missed 3 months ago. We were hoping for maybe 50,000-60,000 just for the down payment, Emily said carefully. We'd pay you back when Mark's next promotion comes. 60,000, more than I'd ever had before Margaret's inheritance. Money they assumed was theirs to request without asking about my plans. That's a significant amount, I said. But you have it, Mark added, tone suggesting the decision was obvious. And we're family. This is what family does. Family, the word they'd weaponized since arriving. Tell me about Sophie, I said, changing the subject. Emily softened instantly. She's excited. She pats my belly, talks to the baby. Yesterday she said she wants to teach the baby to color. For a moment I saw the daughter I'd known years ago, before promotions, house hunting, and my homelessness became an inconvenience. I miss her, I said quietly. Then come home, Emily urged. Emma needs her grandmother. The baby will too. You're running away from the people who love you most. Am I? Because when I was sleeping in my car, neither of you seemed to think Sophie needed her grandmother much. Mark's jaw tightened. That's not fair, Louise. We offered you our guest room for 6 weeks, until I became inconvenient, I said. You weren't inconvenient. You were, he searched for words. Going through a difficult time. Sometimes people in crisis need professional help, not just family. Professional help. As if homelessness was a breakdown, not the result of losing everything to a flood. I wasn't having a breakdown, Mark. I was having a housing crisis. And now you're not, Emily said brightly. So let's move forward. You have this inheritance, we have this house opportunity, and Sophie has grandparents who want to be in her life. It's perfect. I excused myself to the restroom. In the mirror, I saw a woman no longer hollow-cheeked and desperate, but not yet entirely sure of her own power. I thought of Margaret and Elaine, who'd built their lives on respect and love. Of Sharon, who'd befriended me simply because kindness was her nature. And of my new locks, my keys, my space. When I returned, Mark was showing Emily something on his phone. Likely house photos or mortgage calculators that proved how my money would make dreams possible. I'd like to see where you're living, Emily said as I Saturday, tomorrow before we fly back. Maybe we could stay the night, Mark added casually. Save on the hotel bill. Get a feel for the neighborhood. There it was, the assumption that my home was available to them simply because we were family. I'm sorry, but that won't be possible, I said. Why not? Emily frowned. Is the house not livable? It's perfectly livable. I just prefer to keep my own space. But we're family, Mark said as if that explained everything. Yes, you are. And you have a hotel room. The silence that followed was sharp. Emily stared at me, struggling to understand how the mother who once slept in a car rather than impose had suddenly drawn boundaries. You're being ridiculous, she said finally. We flew all the way here to see you and you won't even let us stay one night? You flew here to assess my inheritance, I said calmly. And to convince me to fund yours. Frank's face flushed red. We're concerned about you. You're not acting like yourself. You're right, I said calmly. I'm acting like someone who's learned the difference between being wanted and being useful. Emily's eyes filled with tears, real ones maybe, though I wasn't sure I could tell anymore. How can you say that? You're my mother. I love you. I know you do. But your love has conditions I'm no longer willing to meet. What conditions? The condition that I be grateful for scraps of attention. That I never expect too much, ask for too much, need too much. That my needs always come second to your convenience. I pulled out my wallet to pay for dinner. A small gesture but symbolic. I wasn't someone who needed others to pick up the check anymore. I'll drive you back to your hotel, I said. The ride was silent except for Emily's sniffles and Mark's muttered complaints about California traffic. At the hotel, Emily turned to me with the same expression she'd perfected as a teenager. Half wounded, half manipulative. Mom, please don't let some old woman's house come between us. Don't let money change who we are as a family. Some old woman's house. As if Margaret had been nothing more than a convenient benefactor, her carefully preserved home just a windfall to be liquidated. Money didn't change who we are, Emily. It revealed who we've always been. Mark got out without a word, but Emily lingered, her hand on the door. We'll come by tomorrow morning before our flight. Maybe you'll feel differently after you've had time to think. Maybe, I said, though we both knew I wouldn't. That night I sat on Margaret's porch with tea, watching the neighborhood settle into evening quiet. Sharon's house was dark, she'd gone to her daughter's for the weekend, but other windows glowed with warm light. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. I love you, Mom. I hope you remember that. I typed and erased responses before settling on. I love you too. That's why this hurts so much. But I didn't send it. Instead, I turned off my phone and locked my new locks behind me. Tomorrow would bring the final confrontation. The moment I'd have to choose between the family I was born into and the life I was building. For the first time since Emily's call about their visit, I felt ready. I'd spent months surviving on scraps of shelter, dignity, love. I'd forgotten I deserved better until Margaret's inheritance reminded me that some people know the difference between charity and care, obligation and genuine affection. In the morning, Emily and Mark would arrive expecting the grateful, accommodating woman they'd always known. Instead, they'd meet the woman I was becoming. Someone who understood her worth. Someone who knew that the most radical act of self-love is refusing to accept less than you deserve. The locks were changed. The boundaries were set. Tomorrow I'd learn whether love could survive the loss of convenient exploitation, or whether some relationships only worked when one person held all the power. I woke before dawn and made coffee in Margaret's kitchen, watching the sky lighten over the San Gabriel Mountains. By 9 o'clock I was dressed and ready. The navy dress that made me look competent and the pearl earrings from Margaret's jewelry box. In the mirror, I saw a woman who belonged here, who had earned her place. Sharon moved around her kitchen next door, but I didn't go to her. This was mine to handle. At 9:47 a rental car pulled into my driveway. Emily and Mark emerged, looking tired, slightly hungover. Too much wine last night while planning strategy, no doubt. Mark carried a briefcase, pathetic but telling. Papers to back whatever argument they'd rehearsed. I opened the door before they could knock, stepping onto the porch instead of inviting them in. "Good morning," I said pleasantly. "How was the hotel?" "Fine," Emily said, her eyes scanning the house for an opening to slip past me. "Can we come in? We don't have much time." Actually, the porch is perfect for this conversation. Mark's jaw tightened. "Louise, it's 40 degrees out here. It's 58 degrees and sunny. Pleasant for December." I sat in one of Margaret's wicker chairs. After a moment they sat too, both clearly uncomfortable with this outdoor negotiation. "Mom," Emily began, her voice patient, practiced. "We talked last night. We want to apologize if we came on too strong about the house. We know you're still adjusting to your new situation." "My new situation? I'm adjusting quite well, actually." "That's wonderful," Mark said, opening his briefcase with unnecessary flourish. "But we need to talk about the big picture. Long-term planning. At your age, it's important to maximize assets." "At my age? I was 62, not 92. What planning do you have in mind?" Mark slid papers across the table. "Real estate listings, mortgage calculations, investment projections. This house is way too big for one person. The maintenance costs, California taxes. You could sell, buy something smaller in Ohio and still have hundreds of thousands left to help your family build wealth." "Help my family build wealth," I repeated. "Exactly," Emily said eagerly. "It's about generational wealth. What's the point of all this money if it just sits here while we struggle with mortgages and daycare?" Are you struggling, Emily? She blinked, unprepared. Not struggling exactly, but with the baby coming we need to position ourselves. The house we want isn't just for us. It's for Emma and the baby. Good schools, safe neighborhood, room to grow. And you think I should subsidize this positioning? We think you should invest in your grandchildren's future, Mark said smoothly. Instead of rattling around in some dead woman's house playing make-believe about starting over at 62. The silence was sharp. Even the birds seemed to pause. Emily went pale. Clearly they'd agreed he wouldn't say that. Frank, Emily said quietly. No, let him finish, I said, my voice steady despite the fury building. I'm curious about this make-believe life I'm living. Mark leaned back, mistaking my calm for agreement. Look, Louise, I get it. You've had a rough few months. The flood, temporary housing, very traumatic. But you can't just run away to California and pretend to be someone you're not. You're a grandmother from Ohio, not some California lifestyle woman. This is just postponing the inevitable, returning to reality. And what reality is that? I asked evenly. That I belong near my family? That your purpose is supporting the next generation, not playing house with someone else's life. There it was. The truth beneath all their careful maneuvering. To Mark, my value was purely utilitarian. Free childcare, holiday hosting, and now financial backing for their ambitions. The idea that I might have my own dreams, my own right to happiness, simply didn't fit in his world. I looked at Emily, who stared at her hands, avoiding my eyes. She wasn't disagreeing with Mark. She was just embarrassed he'd said it so plainly. You know what's interesting? I said lightly. 3 months ago I would have agreed with you. I would have sold this house, moved back to Ohio, handed you whatever money you wanted. I would have been grateful you still wanted me in your lives, even after proving how much of a burden I could be. Mom, Emily began, but I held up a hand. But then I learned something important. Do you know what it was? Neither answered. I learned some people invite you into their lives and some just tolerate you until it's inconvenient. I learned the difference between being loved and being useful. I stood, smoothing my dress, feeling the solid weight of my house key in my pocket. Emily, I love you. I love Sophie. I love the new baby. But I won't bankroll your life while you treat mine as disposable. We're not treating your life as disposable, Emily protested, finally looking up. We want you to be part of our lives. That's what this is about. No, this is about you wanting my money. If you wanted me in your lives, you wouldn't have let me sleep in my car for 3 months while you shopped for bigger houses. Mark snorted. Here we go again with the car thing. You act like we threw you on the street. You didn't throw me out. You just made it clear I wasn't welcome. Mark caught himself, but I saw the word he'd been about to use. Burden. I was what, Mark? You were going through something we couldn't fix, Emily said quickly. We thought space might help you get perspective. And now I have perspective. I see clearly you view my inheritance as a solution to your problems, not as my reward for surviving mine. I walked to the edge of the porch, glancing at the neighborhood Margaret and Elaine had chosen to build their life in. Sharon was watering her plants and waved when she saw me. I waved back, feeling the simple joy of being seen by someone who expected nothing from me but kindness. So what happens now? Emily asked, real fear in her voice. Now you catch your flight home. You buy whatever house you can afford on Mark's salary. You raise your kids without expecting me to pay for it. And us. Her voice was small. That depends entirely on whether you can love me without expecting me to be grateful for the privilege. Mark gathered his papers, face flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. You're throwing away your family over money. I'm not throwing anything away, Mark. I'm refusing to purchase love that should be freely given. Fine, he snapped, standing abruptly. But don't come crying to us when this California fantasy falls apart and you're alone with nothing but pride. I've been alone before, I said quietly. It's not as frightening as you think. Emily stood more slowly, tears streaming. For a moment I thought she might apologize, but instead she lifted her chin the way she had as a child, defensive pride disguised as strength. I hope you're happy, she said. I'm getting there. I watched them load their luggage into the rental car. Emily looked back once as they pulled away. Mark stared straight ahead, already planning his next move. After they disappeared around the corner, I sat in Margaret's chair and pulled out my phone. 17 missed calls, 43 texts. I deleted them all. Then I opened my contacts and dialed a number I'd memorized but never used. "Mr. Hale," I said when he answered. "I have a question about changing my will." "Of course. What kind of changes?" "I want to set up a scholarship fund for women over 50 starting over after losing everything. And I want to leave the house to someone who'll appreciate what Margaret and Elaine built." "Do you have a beneficiary in mind?" I looked toward Sharon's house, where she was deadheading roses with the patient care of someone who understood that beautiful things need tending. "Yes," I said. "I think I do." That evening I called the book club Sharon had mentioned. Anna Whitmire, the woman who answered, sounded delighted. "We're reading Late Bloomers next month. Stories about women finding power later in life. You'll fit right in." As the sun set over the San Gabriel Mountains, I sat on the porch with Margaret's copy of the book, reading about women who'd discovered that the second half of life could be better than the first. The phone was silent. No frantic calls from Emily, no guilt-laden messages. The silence felt like freedom. Tomorrow I'd start planning the scholarship. I'd tend some flowers of my own. I'd host the book club in a living room where my mother's quilt caught the light. I would live a life of my own choosing, surrounded by people who saw my presence as a gift, not a burden. And if Emily and Mark ever learned to love without conditions, they'd be welcome. If they didn't, I would be fine without them. The woman who'd slept in a car for 3 months was gone. In her place was someone who understood that dignity, once reclaimed, is worth more than any family's approval. The doors were locked. The will was changed. And I was finally, completely home.